Welcome back, true crime fans. We have another hair raising episode of Chopped Up Mysteries, where we chop up the mysteries and dive into the darkest corners of crime. Today, we're taking you to Cleveland in the 1930s, a time of jazz, speakeasies, and, oh yeah, gruesome, unsolved murders. We're talking about the Cleveland Torso murders, a case so brutal, so perplexing, that even Eliot Ness, the man who literally took down Al Capone, couldn't crack it. If you thought Cleveland was all about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and rubber factories, well, buckle up. This story, it's not for the faint of heart.
Right. Nothing says family vacation destination like unsolved decapitations. Really sets the mood.
Exactly. So let's set the scene. The 1930s were a tough time in Cleveland. The Great Depression hit the city hard. People were living in shanty towns, barely scraping by, and crime was on the rise. It was in this chaotic backdrop that the Cleveland Torso Killer started his reign of terror. Our first victim was discovered in September of 1934. His body was found by two boys walking along the beach near Lake Erie. Imagine being a kid just hanging out by the lake and stumbling upon a headless corpse.
Yeah, that's going to mess up your game of beach volleyball real quick.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The first body was a male, and the head was nowhere to be found. The police initially thought it was just a one-off thing, maybe an accident or a mob hit. But then, about a year later, another body is found. Again, literally decapitated. This time, they're starting to put two and two together. These were not random. Somebody was hunting people down, cutting off their heads, and scattering the remains.
Sounds like someone was in a really weird mood, right? Like, nah, I don't need the whole body. Just going to toss the head for good measure.
Right? And get this. The second body had been covered in some kind of weird chemical. The police believed the killer was trying to prevent identification. Remember, this is way before DNA testing, so once you cut off someone's head, it's really hard to figure out who they are. No dental records, no fingerprints, nothing.
Yes, the old, if they can't recognize them, they can't catch me trick. Classic.
Yeah, the killer was smart, or at least methodical. Over the next 3 years, between 1935 and 1938, at least 12 bodies were discovered, all with the same horrifying trademarks: decapitation, dismemberment, and most of them were dumped in the Kingsbury Run area, which back then was a rough part of Cleveland, mostly a shanty town where the homeless lived.
Okay, so he's targeting people who are already down on their luck. People who wouldn't immediately be missed. That's cold. Like, next level ice cold.
Exactly. These were the forgotten people, which made it easier for the killer to operate in the shadows. Now, the media, oh, they loved this. They start calling the killer the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. And suddenly, this case goes from a local horror story to national headlines. Everyone's talking about it. But here's the kicker. Despite the high profile, the police are getting nowhere.
Wait, so this guy's out here, chopping heads, leaving body parts all over Cleveland, and nobody can figure out who it is? What, did they not even have a suspect?
Oh no, they had plenty of suspects, but no one solid enough to arrest. The crime scenes didn't leave much in terms of clues. No fingerprints, no witnesses. They tried everything, even resorting to the old round up the usual suspects routine. They'd arrest drifters, ex-convicts, anyone who looked a little shady, but nothing stuck.
Sounds like they were just playing a big game of maybe it's this guy, maybe it's not. That's real helpful.
Pretty much. But then in 1938, Eliot Ness, yeah, that Eliot Ness, gets involved. He's the public safety director at the time, basically overseeing the police and fire departments. So Ness decides to get serious. He bulldozes the Kingsbury Run shantytown, burns it to the ground, hoping to either flush the killer out or at least make the area harder for him to operate in.
Wait, hold up. So, Ness thought the killer was like camping out there, toasting marshmallows in between murders?
More or less. It was a last-ditch effort, you know. But did it work? Ha! Of course it didn't. The killer didn't stop because of Ness's little campfire. In fact, right after the bulldozing, two more bodies were found. It was like the killer was taunting Ness, saying, "Yeah, nice try, but you'll never catch me."
So what? The guy just kept on killing while Eliot Ness was busy playing fireman?
Not for long. After those two bodies were found, the murders mysteriously stopped. And that's what's so frustrating about this case. It's like the killer just vanished into thin air. No more bodies, no more taunting, nothing.
Classic serial killer move. I'm bored now. Guess I'll just retire.
Right? But here's the thing, Ness did have a suspect, a doctor named Frank Sweeney. Sweeney had some serious issues. He was an alcoholic and he'd spent time in mental institutions. He also happened to be a cousin of one of Ness's political rivals, which, you know, complicated things. The police thought Sweeney might have been the killer because he had the medical knowledge to do the kind of precise dismemberment seen in the victims.
Wait, so they had a suspect, a doctor with a scalpel hobby and a shady background, and they still couldn't make a case?
Yep. And get this, Sweeney voluntarily committed himself to a mental institution, so he was essentially out of reach for the police. There wasn't enough concrete evidence to arrest him, and since he was already locked away, it became a cold case. Ness was convinced Sweeney was the guy, though. Sweeney even sent Ness taunting postcards while he was institutionalized, but still, no arrest, no trial, nothing.
So we've got an alcoholic doctor chopping up bodies, sending postcards like, wish you were here, and the police just shrug? Sounds about right.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but that's what makes this case so legendary. The Cleveland torso killer was never caught, never officially identified, and despite some suspects, no one was ever brought to justice. The killings just stopped. And that's where the story ends.
Wait, that's it? The guy gets away with it? No dramatic takedown, no courtroom showdown, nothing. Man, true crime is depressing sometimes.
I know, right? But it's the mystery that keeps people hooked. Was it really Sweeney? Or was the killer someone else entirely? Someone who just blended back into society, never to be caught? That's the question. And to this day, we still don't have an answer.
Okay, but like, can we talk about the fact that the guy might have just stopped? What, did he get bored? Or maybe he got old and arthritis kicked in and he couldn't chop heads off anymore?
Could be. Some serial killers do stop for all kinds of reasons: age, illness, or sometimes they just move on to something else. But the Cleveland torso murders, they're still considered one of the greatest unsolved cases in American history. And unless someone uncovers new evidence or a deathbed confession or something, it's likely to stay that way.
So, basically, if you're ever in Cleveland, don't go wandering around near Kingsbury Run after dark, right?
Exactly. Keep your head on straight, literally. You never know what's lurking out there.
Yeah, that's my takeaway. Avoid Cleveland lakes, rivers, and any creepy doctors with too much free time.
Solid life advice. And with that, we're wrapping up today's episode. Thanks for tuning in to Chopped Up Mysteries. Don't forget to follow us, leave a review, and keep an eye out for our next episode where we'll dive into another creepy, crawly crime.
And hey, if you see any heads floating by, call the police. Or, just keep walking.
Stay safe, everyone. Until next time, this is Chopped Up Mysteries, where we chop it up so you don't have to.